Hi, I'm back. Unit 3, day 24. We were starting to look at the structured historical paragraph. We're up to part 2. We were using Theodore Roosevelt, Progressive Crusader, looking at a whole bunch of sources. We actually, remember in 11th grade, we looked at a timeline and we came up with a T-chart instead of that whole scary big text box. We came up with a T-chart. We broke apart the timeline to look at different things, to figure out what made him progressive and then maybe made him not as progressive. We had to infer that, right? So now the question is what we're going to do with that and what you're going to do with that next source that you need to look at. Remember, this is a series of 4 sources, although on the Regent, you're going to have more than that when it comes down to the essay. We're going to look at the first conservationist president, then a little bit together, and you're going to work on your own, then new nationalism, then Roosevelt's bold Grand Canyon move. And again, we are looking at, was President Roosevelt a progressive president? Or maybe when was he not a progressive president and caused decline? Now here's what I want you to do, okay? I might help you with this one. We have the first conservationist president, again from the Miller Center. It's saying conservationist, which means just, by the way, that he's going to save some things for the environment, meaning not save everything, not totally preserve it, but conserve it, save some. And it says he's the first conservationist president. So he uses presidential authority to issue executive orders, his power as president, to create 150 new national forests, increase the amount of protected land, all this stuff. Now, that's pretty cool, considering I was in some of them. And I am going to left-clicked, and then I went up top to highlight, and I highlighted this yellow. So when I finish the source, and I'm going to go down to my T-chart, the same thing I did before, guess what? I'm going to have some information. Now, remember, it doesn't tell us to quote. It tells us to use the evidence. So we're going to have to rephrase and use the information on our own. Now, we have this information, and this source continues. Remember that those highlighted words, you may need to ask your teacher or message your teacher, ask for help for some of them. I don't know what you did with, you may have looked at this in class. But going back here, we have this information that he made all these new national forests increase the amount of protected land. So we're going to write here, remember, 3 bulleted points, increase the amount of national forests. And remember, going back to the source, but I'm paraphrasing. And how much is it? From 42 to 172 million acres, and tripled the amount of protected land. Now, you're going to go through this source, and you're going to find some more information. I would say specifically looking at the way he wanted to improve nature. That's a hint. And the way he wanted to do other things with forests, although there's an argument that maybe he didn't save enough. Hint, going back here for you're not as progressive. Then there's the whole argument about the new nationalism. You're going to work on that too. Same thing with the T-chart. Your teacher may ask you to do this with a partner. Your teacher may ask you only to look at one source. Don't know what your teacher's going to ask you to do. I'm just saying what you might want to do. And then there's a whole fascinating document, what he did for the Grand Canyon. And there's 2 sides to it, as you will see. Sorry, I'm jumping around over here. Same thing, that T-chart. I don't know what your teacher is going to ask you to do, but at the end of the lesson, the teacher may present you with a bunch of different questions, but you're going to pick this question. To what extent was President Roosevelt a progressive president? Meaning, how much was he progressive president? And what evidence, I was jumping ahead to that word, supports your claim. So now I gave you 2 sentence starters here, really paragraph starters, but however way you want to say it, whichever way you see it. President Roosevelt was a progressive president because he did this and this. Notice I'm asking for at least 2 things. Evidence that demonstrates this is because whatever, and then an additional piece of evidence or another idea. Let's add that in. Or another, help, my computer. Another example. Hey, oh, you can hit tab, it comes up with that. Example is blank as, instead of because, as this happened, and you can keep going that way. Okay, so again, just reviewing what you're doing here. Instead of just, like, freaking out when you see this whole big question over here, and it tells you click to add text, instead, like we did before, you're gonna make a T-chart, you're gonna think of both sides. I want at least 3 bulleted points backed up by evidence. Going to do that for each source or one source, depending on what your teacher tells you. Then you're going to use these sentence starters to go either one source side or the other. I personally think you should do both sides because I know what's coming. And you're going to need to take both sides, just by the way. But I think you got this. You're going to have to get your head around it. Depending on what your teacher asks you to do, you will ace it. Why? Because you're focused and you're trying. And remember, that's what we do. We try.